All right, welcome back, commissioners, and back to you, Chair Harrington.
Thank you, Clerk Moss. Appreciate it. We have 3 items remaining on our work session agenda. The first one includes some outside guests, so we'll turn it right over to the team for the North Hillsboro Industrial Renewal Area Expansion Proposal. Welcome, Mayor Callaway.
Very good. Thank you, Chair. Good to see you again. And thanks to the Board of County Commissioners for considering this item and your partnership with us for many years. Commissioner Rogers, you were there, I think, for the first, for our first one. And Mayor Willie.
I was here when they signed your incorporation paper.
And, all right. And I think you were here when we brought these down from the top of Mount Sinai.
That's right.
Marble tablets, but I wasn't going to go that far back.
Okay.
We'll say thank you also to Commissioner Willie, who has done so much of the work that we continue to build upon now. And thanks again to the County Commission for all of your work in support. So, what we're looking to do today, our presentation, our briefing is to ask you to amend and expand our North Hillsboro industrial renewal areas. We've recently seen the successes of projects like the Clean Water Services Pump Station, PGE's Evergreen Substation, the Hitachi Global Nanotechnology Innovation Center, Flexential Data Centers, and JSR Micro. And so, there's good news, good potential, great possibilities for us as we move forward. And with that, I'll turn it over to Val Akata, who is our Economic Development Supervisor, and Dan Diaz, our Economic and Community Development Director.
Welcome.
Thank you, Mayor, and good afternoon, Chair Harrington and Board of Commissioners. So we have about 8 or 9 slides today, just to get into a little bit of additional detail. And the first slide really is where we oftentimes will start with this policy related work and establishing what is the policy basis that's informing this work. And from the local Hillsboro standpoint, those are really made up of 4 different areas. We have our Hillsboro 2035 community plan, which is our community's vision of what it would like to see Hillsboro be and continue to grow and evolve into over the next 20 years. Our Hillsboro comprehensive plan, which also includes the Jackson East community plan, that is primarily a land use and an infrastructure plan, but also lays out the growth for this area up on the northern reaches of our city. The existing North Hillsboro urban renewal plan. So this is an expansion of an existing district that has been established a few years back, and we'll talk more about that in a minute. But there are policies within that existing plan and procedures within that plan that we have to follow and build upon. And then lastly, we have to work and operate in the confines of state law, primarily Oregon revised statute, in terms of the ability to enact a tax increment financing tool such as this, and also coordination with partnering districts and taxing authorities such as yourselves. And so you see the few of those documents on the slide before you. I'm not going to run through the many policy points within all those different plans that our community has brought forward that inform this, but a couple of key policy categories that are found both in those plans as well as in the draft plan for this urban renewal district expansion are first and foremost to continue to create a vibrant local and regional economy, and in turn also have a vibrant local community. In addition to that, it is to emphasize the City of Hillsboro's commitment to dense and efficient land use and serviceability, especially across a broad array of sectors. And so while today's conversation will be primarily around industrial and manufacturing related users or to be uses, we also hold the same is true for other commercial and housing areas. We continue to be very focused through our economic development goals and policies around diversifying our industrial base, both by a sector standpoint and from an economic standpoint. So that's having a variety of wages available in our community to different levels of training, also having a strong and robust tax base that help to provide both our local community services as well as the other taxing jurisdictions that rely on Hillsboro's tax base to also help fund services. And then lastly, a piece, and there's many more, but the one I'll conclude on for this slide is the commitment to natural resource and open space enhancements. And so there are a multitude of points within the different policy documents stated on this slide that emphasize our commitment to preserving existing and to be created natural corridors and greenways, while also being sensitive as we urbanize the areas within our planning authority. You'll see that reflected in the draft plan as well. The city's vision for the Crescent Park Greenway, which is both a passive environmental area with also some active trail and other amenity spaces, circumvents the entire city from the stadium and Highway 26 corridor on the north end all the way around to Dairy Creek on the west end of town, coming around our downtown where we sit here today, and then ultimately linking through the south part of the community into South Hillsboro and some of the recent housing areas down there. So I believe the Board of Commissioners are pretty familiar with tax increment financing, but just as it relates to this district, we wanted to cover the basics in case there were any questions in general or specifically to the proposal that we're bringing in front of you. So this slide really shows that we are seeking to build upon the existing frozen base of property taxes, which were locked in when the district was originally established in 2016. That's the dark blue band at the very bottom. Over the last few years in the existing district, which is adjacent to the expansion area we're talking about today, we have been already seeing the tax increment growth really as a byproduct and a resultant of the investments we've made through the existing district and through the investments that have come from the private sector into that area as well. And as the mayor mentioned earlier, this has been done in great partnership, not just with Hillsboro, but with partners like Clean Water Services, who we worked on to put a sewer pump station into the very center of this area, which provides efficient and full capacity sewer system and service to the entire planned area. Partners at Portland General Electric and also partners at the county as well through a variety of different infrastructure types. And then we hit a point both in the current district and in the amended district where we start to initiate some key pieces that are of both interest to the county and the city. One of those is revenue sharing, and we'll talk at the end of the presentation around what the existing district has been doing in terms of a tax base growth in revenue. But during this time of abated taxes, we are required by state law, but do anticipate in the next handful of years surpassing the 10% of the initial maximum indebtedness. That's 10% of the revenues collected, eclipsing about $17.2 million a year, which is what the maximum indebtedness of the zone is. That's important because at that point, we start to share that blue area that up to that point is focused entirely into this geographic area, into these projects. A portion that starts to get shared back out with the various taxing districts that are a part of this area. And then beyond that, when we hit 12.5% of that maximum indebtedness number, we also cap the amount of additional revenue collected. So that would increase the additional revenue sharing opportunity and accessibility. And so that's a very technical way of saying what we're trying to do here is really maximize the investments and the realization of this urban area and the tax base growth with a time component on there, because the sooner we can deliver and achieve the full policy objectives of the area, the goal is to then restore this out of the urban renewal district and bring it fully back onto all of our collective tax rolls. So unless there's any questions on the first two slides, which I'd be happy to either answer now or at the end of the presentation, I'll turn over to my colleague, Val Licata.
We'll hold our questions till you've had a chance to go through the whole presentation.
Great, thank you.
Chair Harrington, County Commissioners, I'm Val Licata with the City of Hillsboro Economic Development Department. So I am going to go over a little bit of history, so where the current boundary is located. So the existing boundary of the Industrial Renewal District is south of Highway 26, north of Evergreen Road, and west of Northeast 59th and east of Northeast Sewell. So the purpose of the district is to promote the expansion of existing companies and recruit new complementary companies to the area, to provide infrastructure such as roads, water, sewer that can accommodate industrial development, and to strategically plan and implement the enhancement of natural resource areas and promote open space such as the Crescent Park Greenway. So this slide outlines the limits of the existing plan and our proposed amendment. So we are proposing to add 192 acres to the boundary, add $174 million in new project costs, which Dan will go over in more detail. Increase TIF revenue by about $42 million and increase the maximum indebtedness by approximately 96 million. So I'd like to point out the photos at the top of the slide are taken from within the boundary of the industrial renewal area. So the first slide on the left is of stack infrastructure and T5 data center under construction. The center slide or photo is of the Hitachi Nanotechnology Innovation Center and GXO Logistics. And then the slide on the right, or the photo on the right, is of the Evergreen substation that PGE owns in Northeast 30th Avenue. So we also have a short video of the North Hillsboro Technology Park that we would like to share. It highlights the progress we've made over the last few years with our partners in the area.
So you can see a lot of the different elements in that video. Many of those roadways were constructed ahead of being able to be competitive for and garner the investment of the companies you saw labeled there. Those were predominantly funded through existing urban renewal funds. You see some of the roads go and then are stubbed. That's because in part we made a strategic investment and the funding to date stopped, and we are continuing to will continue to accumulate TIF revenue, the tax increment financing revenue to expand those out further. What wasn't labeled, and I was just making a note of, we'll label in the next video, is the Crescent Park Greenway going through there as well. In between those developments, you can see the creek corridors, and it's those riverine areas where we have a sizable buffer and setback that is starting to already collectively link that trail project, which right now we do have full linkage and control of land going from the Gordon Faber Sports Complex almost to Sewell Avenue, and we're in the work to try to get the link all the way to Jackson School Road, which is, we start to quickly approach a third of the entire circumference of the Crescent Park Greenway. But moving forward, it brings us to why consider expanding the boundary and amending the plan. And there are a few reasons that are listed on this slide. The first is to maximize the sustainable economic impact of the urbanization, especially in this area, but across our community. And in doing this, we are able to, again, address infrastructure, in some cases, address parcel aggregation, and especially when we're interfacing with some of the key target industries that we have, that we share very closely with our state partners and with other partners across the region. Having a lot of that infrastructure in those sites development ready, especially in a site constrained region, is both important and a competitive advantage for Hillsboro and Washington County. Second reason that I alluded to earlier is that it really achieves the land use and economic development objectives of this area. We do need setbacks up in this area. You see the storm water quality ponds that are required as well to help address the stormwater impacts and also mitigate impacts on our tributaries. But we are maximizing, you can see even on the photos here, nearly every building in the area is multi-story, and we're starting to see some of the use types go even further, more vertical than that. The parking fields also, while there is parking here because it is a major employment hub, we are starting to see those parking fields shrink down in size and not take up quite as predominant of a usage. Some of the green areas you see, for example, in the bottom photo here, which is the Hitachi High-Tech Global Nanotechnology Center, is land banked for future expansion as well. So these companies are coming in, making preliminary investments, recognizing the strength of our Silicon Forest here in Washington County, and trying to do their best to prepare for efficient expansion, both from a business mindset, but also a land use mindset into the future as well. Thirdly, is it supports the implementation of the Jackson East Comprehensive Planning, which our council adopted at the end of last year. And there's a portion of that area that is very highly parcelized at the moment and is mixed with, in some cases, with small agricultural lands, some small timbered forest parcels, and in some cases, rural residential uses. And our ability to implement and make the greatest utilization of that area and not have it sit in its existing state, even though it has an urban plan over it. The urban rural district is a great way for us to both advance that and help maximize that while also engaging some of those stakeholders and trying to mitigate impacts there as well. We've talked a lot about, and you saw in the video, the support, the delivery of the infrastructure. That's really a large way that we front load the infrastructure. But you'll notice that in a lot of the cases, and as is the case in the picture again at the bottom of the screen here, we're not putting full cycle tracks and street lights in. On the bottom part of that photo, you can see they're not in yet. That's because we deliver that section of the roadway with minimum cost and maximum extent. But then on the north side where Hitachi's come in, we work with the private development, so they are still bearing those costs. And so we get the balance and the benefit collectively of having a multimodal transportation system here that is in part front loaded with some public investment, but private sector is also coming in and bearing the cost of a lot of that infrastructure in their own right and helping us to finish out that infrastructure as the area matures over time. And then lastly, is it really enables the effective utilization of this public financing tool. I go back to our partnership with Clean Water Services, for example, and when we originally did the planning up in this area, we anticipated in planning with them the need for about 3 or 4 separate pump stations. And those are major capital expenditures to serve the entire drainage basin. But with tools like Urban Renewal and with the planning and level of coordination that we've enjoyed with that partner, we were able to go deliver a site that would have been normally the 3rd sequence pump station, but was centrally located. and build that in a way that realized cost savings and project savings. So we cut down on the number of infrastructure components needed to still serve the same area. That's a way that we can collaboratively get to more efficiency, also from a public financing standpoint. So we look forward to the expansion to extend some of that existing infrastructure that's already been planned. There are road networks like Meek Road, for example, that is largely under Washington County jurisdiction. We have started to take over some of that jurisdiction as we're annexing areas here. Jackson School Road is another major county facility in this area that we've evaluated and are eligible projects to fund. And so that's a big piece to that fifth bullet of how do we have effective utilization of this tool, really though to help deliver infrastructure, but also offset some of the cost of that infrastructure. So the geographic areas that we are considering for expanding, the drone footage flew through much of the green area, and you can see it by the label of Meek Road. That was that Meek sub area that has been regionally designated for a major campus site. We're talking greater than 100 acres or more. And we are looking to the area immediately west of that. And it may be faint on your map, but you can see some of the gray parcel lines in there too. That shows that this is really a different ownership structure than some of the other existing areas. That's one of the many reasons that we feel that bringing this into the urban renewal district, both for help in aggregating and preparing those sites for transition to a higher and more intensive urban use, as well as bringing infrastructure into some of that area that you can end up with small pieces that hold out, and that creates critical gaps in the infrastructure, which can severely delay our ability to plan and realize this area. And so it's that about 192 acres in yellow, that would be the geographic expansion. And for those that aren't maybe fully familiar with urban renewal, the state law piece of this that I mentioned in the first slide limits the amount we can expand a urban renewal district to 20% of the geographic area and also 20% of the maximum indebtedness. The maximum indebtedness just means the total amount of public debt we can take out to basically expend on projects. And so that 20% is up there. We are under both of those state thresholds in this work. So that's the geographic expansion. And then this one, while it still shows the geographic expansion map, really gets into the projects that we are looking at. And so the table at the bottom with a little bit smaller font, again, apologize for that, breaks out the general categories that will be eligible projects for funding using this tool. You can see that we're almost split about 80% for transportation projects and other public utility projects. Other public utility projects are things like water lines, sewer lines, pieces like that. Transportation projects obviously are rights of way and design and construction of roadways like you've seen, or contributions to improving road infrastructure like Meek Road. And then you can see there's a variety of other important areas, but at a little bit lower percentage thresholds, the trail and open space that we've talked about throughout this presentation and the natural resource enhancements. We have taken areas, and there's a site kind of right there. Sorry for those of you with your back, but it's kind of right at the juncture of the yellow and the green was the very first property that the urban renewal district bought up here. It was predominantly floodplain, and it was right in the smack in the middle of Weibel Creek. It's right a section of the Crescent Park Greenway. And we continue to work with private developers, our public works teams, Clean Water Services to do restorations and enhancements and mitigation banks up in that area as well. So again, getting greater efficiency of use out of the developable portions, but also using that development energy to do uplift and enhancements up into that corridor as well, because prior to that, it had basically been farmed right up to kind of the ditch edge, and now we're turning it back into really a functioning creek. So you can see in total, there's about $370 million of projects that have been identified. They basically have to be on this list to be eligible for funding. That's why that number is bigger than the maximum indebtedness number. But we also anticipate that urban renewal should not and hopefully will not be the only tool helping us advance those. Again, it is an initial funding source, but we do continue to seek private sector investment to pay for parts of that. And we also seek other public funding sources, whether that be from the state or other agencies, to also sometimes come in and help blend with that work. Just to keep us moving, because I know you do have 2 additional items after this.
This is the big one.
Okay, well, I don't know if I feel more pressure or less pressure. So
No.
home stretch. So now into the number side of that. So the maps and the fun pictures are away, but really this at the end of the day is a financing and a tax-based driven consideration and tool. And so in the packet, I wanted to point out was a table that talks about the proposed amendment And it basically breaks out what is the financial impact to each of the affected taxing jurisdictions up in this area. And if anybody would like a hard copy of that, county staff were great. They brought some extra hard copies here. to
Good,
pass
I
around.
forgot mine upstairs.
You might pass.
Yeah, that was in the original.
Oh,
I was
no,
looking
I
at
got it
the
here.
original one, but I didn't see it in this one, so thank you for the rec.
Yeah. So what is going around is slightly different than what's on the screen before you. Let me speak to the handout that is in the draft report first.
No. I don't have the other packet.
So two different tables. The one on the screen is a tracking of the basically the success of the urban renewal district to date and the assessed value growth in that area. And so you can see up there, we started the district, the first full fiscal year was 2016-17. And you can see that the total assessed value at that point in time was about 423 million. In 2022-2023, the last fiscal year that we have full numbers for, you can see that to date, we have increased the increment collected by about 2,000%, and we've increased the assessed value by over 230%. And for us, it is just as important to be driving these revenue and tax-based fiscal numbers, because this is what will help contribute to the county's general fund in time, and also over time contribute to the city of Hillsboro's general fund, as well as some of the other taxing districts that take a property tax base out of this area. But also the continued and rapid growth of that tax increment really is what determines when do we hit those thresholds of starting to be able to share revenue back out of the district, and when do we hit our max revenue collection? And then the ultimate goal is when do we also find ourselves in a successful position to close out the district as well, which again, we want to have the district open as long as needed to be effective. But at the same time, we also are all collectively looking at closing this out, because hopefully we will be able to demonstrate success of having a well built out urban area, having a diversified economic area, and also having a strong contributing tax base to each of our agencies. So that's what's on the slide up there. Switching gears to a different table was the hard copy table that went around. This really looks at, given the assumptions of tax abatement over the 25 years that are projected for the life of this district as we currently sit. That 25 years started in 2016, 2017 too, for reference. You can see a breakout of the revenue and the foregone revenue by year over that full duration of time. You'll see that for Hillsboro and Washington County, there are some relatively large numbers of foregone revenue on column number 3 on the far right. But that is assuming the build out and the levels of assessed values that we've seen up to date. This is some of the highest levels of property valuation types that we see across the county's tax base and the city's tax base. And so those foregone numbers of revenues are because in part, we're anticipating and already showing some success in bringing in that level of investment in the first place. If we're not successful in being able to advance infrastructure, we're not successful in being competitive and seeing the private development take place, as you saw in the video, then those numbers obviously would be quite a bit lower. So I'm happy to come back and answer any questions on that. But that is really, we see already a very strong, healthy district. That's why we do believe that there's the ability to expand the district successfully and also continue that success and be able to fund the additional objectives in a reasonably quick period of time, achieving the goals overall that are laid out in the policies. And then lastly, just a timeline component. And so we are coming to you all in this work session ahead of us sending the required public notice to the different affected taxing agencies, because we have been working with your great staff to receive some inputs to date. But we really wanted to hear from you as a deciding body in this matter before we send that taxing district notice, which we're hoping to do at the end of this week, because that does start a 45-day formal public comment period that you and your staff will also be able to engage us on further. But again, out of respect for you as both a partner and a decision body on this matter, we wanted to get this information ahead of you as soon as we could. So as of right now, we are presenting to you, you see that at basically the 4th row there in August. The next procedural steps would be, we would seek your approval sometime probably in the mid to late September timeframe after that 45-day comment period has closed and we've been able to factor in any additional feedback we receive, whether it be from the county or other taxing districts. Parallel to that, we have already been doing pretty targeted and extensive community engagement, especially to the affected property owners up in this area. We've received quite a bit of very positive feedback for those neighbors because they recognize that this keeps them from being a little bit in a partial limbo state in terms of development happening around them, especially those that have homes up there. And others, they see that there is a benefit to them in terms of getting their lands ready to convert from rural residential or rural to urban uses. And then we will also do further engagement with other stakeholders across the city and the additional state minimum required public notices between now and the September, October decision dates. But lastly, and in closing, the decision cadence really would be, we will take this item to our planning commission in early to mid-September. For their feedback, they've already seen some of the preliminary information on this, but we will send them the final report that's required by state law. But our planning commission also is very good at providing recommendations to our council on various land use and economic development policies. Then we would seek for the council to render your decision, hopefully supporting the expansion. And then we would take it as the last step to our council for their approval as well. And from there, then we do our required after action notification of the taxing districts and the work to then make this effective going into next year. I will note that in the draft report and plan that was in your packet, because the timing sets up as such where the decision is going to be made in October, which to your great assessors folks that are very busy during that time of year, we will probably need to come back and do a final scrub and update on the final numbers because we will be getting new tax information around that time. We don't anticipate the numbers drastically shifting, but we do want to flag that too, because that will be a procedural step we'll want to take for accuracy on the tail end of this. So with that, we appreciate the ability to present and share that information with you. We're definitely happy to take any questions you may have or any other information you feel you need at this time or that we can follow up with.
Well, now is a great time for questions. So commissioners, please, who would like to start off our Q&A session? Or comments?
Happy to. First of all, I have to predicate this by, I've always been a big proponent of URAs. In fact, I think when I was mayor of 12, we set up one of the first ones in the state with Wink Brooks before he came to you all. And I think he's retired now. I don't know. But what I found on these over the years, and I heard you address it a little bit, is that they never really retire. Because what happens is, 25 years out, you start having issues with infrastructure and some other needs. And what assurances are you giving to the partners? I have a couple of questions, but what assurances are you giving to the partners? Because frankly, if I look around this room 25 years from now, I doubt that there are many people who will be working. Mm-hmm. And if they are, they probably won't be with the jurisdictions they're now with. So it's we're making decisions for future folks who are maybe going to say, what were they knuckleheads thinking back in 2023? So what comfort can you give?
Well, Commissioner Rogers, thank you for the question. And while I appreciate the compliment of being a knucklehead, because that is an uplift from what I usually get, but I feel uniquely sitting here with that great question. And
more than I get too. So.
We have our finance director sitting over my shoulder to the right, who is also constantly reminding us of the importance and need to close this out. I think back to Hillsboro's history in partnership with Washington County and the Ronler Acres Urban Renewal District, which Suzanne will keep me honest on this. I believe we closed out after 15 years, 17 years, maybe. See, there she goes. 15 years, I think is what I heard. But we absolutely, as I mentioned earlier in the presentation, have a desire to close this out. Ronler Acres closed out well ahead of the forecasted full year, in part because our community was able to demonstrate great success in seeing the tax increment grow, completing the multitude of projects up in that area, which included things like Brookwood Parkway, Evergreen Road, and some of the other pieces. And so we, like the county, have a shared interest in not keeping this tied up forever. We have very clear goals of the infrastructure that's needed in this area, the sites that we want to market into what target users. And that really is where the commitment is there. We believe the actions are there in terms of how we have been steadfast and focused on growing the tax increment, advancing the projects, seeking to close it out, albeit with this expansion to round out that area. And then lastly is, again, I just come back to the shared interest piece we have. For us, keeping that infrastructure or that tax base tied up, we want to restore that back to our general fund too, much like the other affected taxing districts want to see as well. So I'll just reiterate from earlier in the presentation, our goal is to maximize the yield in this area, try to do it as thoughtfully and as quickly and efficiently as both we can do and as the market will respond to, which that's probably the biggest unknown factor, why I can't sit here and guarantee you a date today. Although recent news that's been out and about even over the last, couple of days, maybe is a positive near-term precursor of that. But that's about as best I can give you. I cannot commit to a date. We also took the step in that same spirit of not further extending that 25-year period with this expansion. We are keeping the original 25. So we basically have about 18, 19 years left in the district. So we hope that those overtures and those actions are received positively in response to your question and into the Board of County Commissioners' consideration of this project.
Comment back and I'll give you my two comments. One, my comment back is that I appreciate that. I'm just hoping that gets memorialized in all the conversations because that's what people are going to look back at and say, well, what were they thinking? What was said? And so I'm raising the question that you memorialize that by saying it is our full intent and so on in 2020, whatever that is, 51, I guess, or what, 50. Yeah. You're going to have somebody read it and say, but that's what you said. My other two comments are, you did one of the better jobs I've seen in regard to the school district. Because quite frankly, giving them a lot more money doesn't help them, as we all know, because they're a part of the state basic school board. So if they get more money, what happens, they have to report that, and then the state basic that they get goes down. So it's kind of a net sum. You did a good job.
Yeah.
I think one of the better jobs I've seen. And my last comment is that one of the things that's very difficult from this table and others to see is if nothing happened, what would be the assessed value versus what you're going to bring? And that's one of the things I used to tell people many years ago. Is take a look at what your frozen base is. Is that what you want in the year 20? I said 50 is not that. It's going to be 47, 46, 48, whatever it comes out. What would that look like in terms of taxes versus what you're bringing to the table? Because nobody ever quantifies that. You kind of do. But when people see that, they say, wow, that's an opportunity cost that we're, foregoing now, but we're going to get this big egg in the future. And nobody ever looks at that. They just say, well, I'm giving up all these taxes. This is terrible. You never would have a tax.
Correct.
If the improvement wasn't done. You and I know that, but it'd be nice if there was some commentary about that.
We appreciate that. And if I may just respond to that last
Oh,
comment, we have seen a bit of the, I get engagement from colleagues sometimes about this, but for argument and to what you're saying is with this investment and what would be the timing of the investment and the tax-based growth without this. In our North Hillsboro area and in this technology park, there was about 12 years from roughly 2006 to about 2016, 17, when we started to really adopt and implement this tool, where we saw very marginal investment and expansion of the area, in part because the cost of extending infrastructure and the proximity to existing infrastructure drove so much of that. So well-suited sites that were a quarter a mile or a half a mile away from existing water lines or service areas, if you had intervening property owners that either weren't accessible, weren't willing to sell, whatever the case might be, the market by itself was not fully responding there. And also with the highest and best uses in our target industries that we also are seeking in this area. Why we wanted to show the drone video primarily is to show that when we are able to collectively align on our plans and our policy objectives and invest jointly, that changed that. One property owner who's 3 parcels in is no longer contingent upon their 2 neighbors. They can become more development ready, and in turn the market can come in and respond that much sooner, getting us back to closing out the district also that much quicker. And so we have seen that both anecdotally and then back to the point about what would be the foregone revenue. That's exactly why I wanted to call the attention and a bit of that caveat to that column 3, because there's a few commas in that number, which are big numbers. But right now, and our staff were just running this number the other day, so Val's can keep me honest on it, but I believe the total tax revenue collected out of that area, the expansion area that we're talking about, is $44,000. primarily because of farm and forest deferral and a lot of it being, there's very few improvements in that area. And so that's really where on that table slide that I showed, when you see 234% assessed value growth, some of that is because it's already a very low basis of which we're also freezing with this urban renewal plan, but also with our investments and with that realization of the capital expenditures of the nature of facilities we have, like high-tech users with a lot of personal equipment in there. That's where we see that rapid escalation and growth.
Okay, we have about 15 minutes for the four of us to have some remaining Q&A time. Who's next?
Well, I'm just gonna comment that, I was around when we initiated this, with a plan of raising $105 or $110 million, I believe, for the infrastructure to develop that North Hillsboro part, and it's been wildly successful, obviously. And so that's exactly what we use these plans for. And certainly it's amazing to see what the increase in the assessed value and those things. So when we do come back on the rolls, it's going to be a significant improvement and enhancement to our taxes. As far as your area of expansion, and this will be my only question, the area of expansion looks like it goes to the western side to Sewell. Is that where you are? Nick, one just before that, I think.
Oh.
Yeah, I can see that one better.
Yeah.
But maybe the other one explains it better. But so is that the maximum amount that you could bring in? I heard you say we had limitations.
I believe the maximum amount in this district we could bring in would be close to about 220 acres. So we are not at the maximum geographic footprint. We're close to it, but under it a bit. The boundaries for reference, and I apologize again to those of you with the back, need multiple laser pointers here, I suppose. But so Sewell Avenue goes here.
Mm-hmm.
And so Sewell is the eastern boundary. Here's Meek Road and Highway 26.
Mhm.
This is the north fork of Weibel Creek, I believe, that comes
okay.
through. And this heavier dotted line is the current urban growth boundary. And so we are going to the edge of that urban growth boundary and north of the creek, west of Sewell Avenue, if that helps answer your question, Commissioner.
So and just west of that is where we're talking about 500 acres for the semiconductor information, or is it?
This area in here.
Yeah, that's right. So
So-
if that would come in, would you be able to
I didn't
expand?
see where you were pointing.
Up
Yeah.
here, Chair Harrington.
Yeah.
So Commissioner Willie, yeah, so let me try to answer both parts of this. So the yellow area is fully inside our urban growth boundary, fully within Hillsboro's area of planning responsibility in coordination with the county. And that's why we do believe that this action is needed with or without any additional considerations. I think what you're referring to is the recently passed Senate Bill 4, which gives the governor executive authority to bring additional lands into UGBs for certain industrial and especially semiconductor related purposes. So the answer to your second question of would this help that? It absolutely would give Washington County and City of Hillsboro a next logical linkage, and we would already be abutting an area that could potentially be considered. That area is eligible per SB4 is the city's understanding. But back to the decision that's before you, we are bringing this forward. Really, we started it absent SB4, and we believe that is an important policy decision to make with or without SB4. If an SB4 decision were made and if lands to the west of this area were included, then absolutely the investments we're making here in the plans we make here would be a logical building off point, and we would be able to see some efficiencies of service into those areas as well if that were so the governor's choice.
And we'd also have funding that would at least take us to that western part of your yellow.
And in some cases into it.
Yeah.
Urban renewal districts can have projects that extend outside of their boundaries. So Meek Road, for example, all the way out to the roundabout at Jackson School Road is an eligible project in the draft plan that's before you and our city council. So in that case, it would actually bring investment opportunity even into that area. Similarly with parts of Jackson School Road and similarly with parts of our Crescent Park Greenway, which serve again the natural function and also possible sewer opportunities and corridor functions as well.
Yeah. Okay, yeah, thank you.
Thank you for this presentation. I'm absorbing as I'm going along here. And you talked a little bit about the school district and the impact there. And those discussions have been moving along at the same pace. Is that correct?
The school district is basically next up on the list to be engaging.
Okay.
So in the order of, I hate to use the word priority because then somebody
Oh.
always feels second to somebody else, but really you as our county partner are at the very top of that list because of your decision-making authority, but also the permanency. But yes, the school district is a partner that we've engaged with in the past with these tools and with the establishment of the existing district, and is an entity that we will be discussing as we get ready to send that formal notice and comment period as well.
And the same with TDFNR.
Yes.
Thank you.
Great presentation. I don't have any questions for you. I think you articulated your desired outcome for this, and I intend to support when it comes back to us.
So I finish off. So first I want to say thank you for utilizing urban renewal. This is a really important tool and once again, yet another exemplary city example. I do have a couple of questions with regard to the time frame based upon the information in the packet and shown here. So about the fourth slide titled, it's the second one titled the existing district and plan that lists out that one. Yep. So this says that for the amended plan, it leads me to think that, so I'm trying to understand the timeframes for, there's an existing plan that's had 7 fiscal years into it, but this also has an amended plan. And I'm trying to confirm, is it really sticking to the original 25-year timeframe? Or is it resetting the timeframe?
Yeah.
Because looking at the document, I searched for the word years and it isn't used. So so please explain that.
Yes, Chair Harrington, thank you for the question and let me do my best. Let me back up first in terms of the policy basis piece, and then I'll try to do my best to clarify and explain our approach and what we anticipate being in the final recommended package as it comes to you and our city council for decision. State law, a couple years ago, I don't remember the exact year now, but the legislature removed actually the time frame caps, back to Commissioner Rogers' questions as well. So we basically could be seeking an even longer time frame than to 25 years. The 25 years on this slide was intended to show that when we initiated the district in 2015, we had modeled everything and softly committed or anticipated a 25-year build and closeout. This slide is a bit misleading. We could probably do a better job of cleaning it up. If you look in the draft report that was in your package, for those of you that have that, if you look on page 21 of the draft report, it shows there's a figure 3 that talks about the projected tax increment revenue.
Hang on. I want to get to that page.
Absolutely. I'm sorry, I don't have hard copies of that one with me today, but.
It's in our packet.
Where was it? Yeah.
Page 21 of their
the
page.
report.
Yeah. The reports.
It'll be figure 3.
So about PDF page 65
Oh, gosh.
under section 6 plan amendments.
Yes, it should look like.
Oh, that's
Yeah, I'd
not,
say page.
what is your print page number?
Print page number is, if you look at the page number in the report itself, it's
Yes.
21.
Not on my.
They scanned in different.
Yeah, the reports have pages of,
Yes, and I'm looking
Page
at
21.
one that has page 21.
it says plan amendments.
So we apologize. Let me at least just read into both for the
What
record.
section is that table in?
This table is in the section 7, financial analysis of the plan.
Section 7.
Yes. It's section 7A and then figure 3 should be on the second page of that section.
Chair, would you like my computer?
What? It's not in the packets.
He's looking at a different document. Which document are you looking at?
I'm looking at
This is
the
the
North
document-
Hillsboro Industrial Renewal Plan proposed.
Chair Harrington, there's the plan and then there's the report. The more detailed financial assessment is in the one that's titled North Hillsboro Industrial Renewal Area Report.
That's
Is that the one you're in?
I thought I was in that one.
It's a plan and renewal
Yeah.
plan, yeah.
Adopted November 2015, Amendment 2023.
Correct.
Yeah, that's the one I was in.
Well, we will make sure, again, we updated this analysis, sent it over last week. We can make sure we follow up with this specific excerpt, but to answer the question, that is what shows the model for the substantial amendment. And we have kept the original 2025 year timeframe, which ends in fiscal year 2040, 2041.
Okay, so that needs to be made abundantly clear to us. Yeah, the document that I pulled down in the original packet doesn't even have that table.
Okay.
So, okay,
But I hope we'll get you that table. And again, when you see the
so
final.
what was the final fiscal year? in your
Final
mind?
fiscal year that we have modeled in our projecting to is fiscal year 2040/2041 would be the,
Okay,
and that comes off of the 25th year going out from starting with 2015-16 back to the original plan horizon.
okay.
Hope that helps.
Yes, helps me a lot. So, my next question is, oh, the other thing is, more internally. I would like us to go back and find out how the board provided its approval of the 2015 plan. Was it done through a letter? Was it done through an RNO? And I would like our support to indicate that we expect the closure to be done no later than that original 25-year period as noted here. So that we also have in our legislative history, and before we have an action on this amended one, that we make note of that and see what, if any, timeframe the board had weighed in on that. So, but that's under our control as well. So, question, you have multiple tools to support economic development in the city. So this next question is merely out of curiosity. So in addition to using urban renewal, are you also able to use your economic development zones and other fee structures to help with achieving the economic development for areas such as this? I assume so, but I'm not in the city.
Depending on how much detail you would like, Chair Harrington,
Very
because
short.
Val is one of our experts in this space as well, and we have a full team committed to this, but the answer is yes.
Terrific.
We do
That's all I was
utilize
looking for.
enterprise zone and a few others. Yep.
Okay, the last one is a very important question for us. So you have urban renewal that essentially freezes the tax basis, but we also have voter approved levies. So I believe that for all of the businesses within the urban renewal area, they are still assessed for the voter approved levies at that levy rate. That would apply for WCCLS and the public safety levy. But I would just like to get confirmation of that before we give our full endorsement. So it seems logical to me that it does. Do you, looking over at the city folks that have your backs, do you think it does?
So, renewal. To your question, WCCLS levy did not. One of our local option measures.
Yeah.
We would get the full amount.
Yeah.
of the WCCLS levy.
And the public safety levy, and then your levies. Yeah, yeah, okay. Yep.
There's a footnote on this table as well that calls that out. I think
Right,
maybe
at the
answer that
bottom.
question. But
Oh, I didn't see it. Great.
Yeah.
Okay. Phew. So really, those were my outstanding concerns and questions. So pretty simple set.
I have one more, I apologize, and that is that we're sitting here as a Board of County Commissioners, but we also sit as the Board of Directors of Clean Water Services. And Hillsborough has been very creative in the past in making certain their lines are of a certain size, so that Clean Water Services has to pay for those lines, instead of you all. What are you going to do in this area so that the county not only loses a lot of tax revenue, Clean Water Services gets a huge infrastructure bill because you upsize your sewer lines so that they end up putting them all in. And that is problematic to me because I'm not from this district, I'm from one south, and I don't think it's fair we pay for
You want me to help?
that.
If you'd like, I can speak, especially in the specific areas. I think there's some very good examples addressing your point, Commissioner Rogers, where we've increased the collaboration and try to be intentional with the sizing, but by all means, Diane, if you'd like to.
I think what Director Rogers is referring to is really having to do with the local lines, which really is not really what this is. You know, this is really coming up with the appropriate trunk and interceptor sizing to serve a broad range of industrial customers.
They're not gonna put any of the local lines in.
Well, there might be some, but I anticipate most of these are larger diameter pipelines. And the good news is the Clean Water Services team of today, under Joe Gall with Andy Braun and Chris Faulkner, really closely working with the city of Hillsboro and the Public Works team to do this industrial planning. So I think it would be safe to say we're putting all of our creative lines, especially now because we're doing our West Basin master planning. I think some of the issues of the Clean Water Services of the past really isn't transferring forward to this current team. I think Robbie and folks would really agree with that. Yeah. So we've been working really closely integrating. Yeah.
Take that to Steve's side.
The only additional piece I'd add, because that's exactly spot on and really the progression of the relationship as of late in the planning of this area. But I want to just also, part of that answer, harken back to Commissioner Willie's point, is as we have incrementally sought to build on each of these areas and plan for them, especially in sewer, we have to think about those basins. And so there are times where we will thoughtfully try to coordinate with CWS of what is the appropriate size of that line, both for what's there immediately, and maybe that's a little bit to the smaller side or ours, but what could be there ultimately as well? And does that increase the size because of the capacities being able to pick up other areas that then we have to further coordinate, or perhaps that jurisdictional switch to CWS is appropriate and happens?
Ooh, okay.
We're good.
Well done. So did you get what you need from us in order for you to move forward with the significant next steps and the 45-day notices, so forth?
We greatly appreciate the time and the feedback. We have what we need. You can expect that notice coming soon. And then if any further engagement is needed, we're happy to engage your staff or you with that. And then if everything goes smooth from there, we would look forward to a decision from you in that September timeframe.
Terrific.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All righty.
Keeping them-
So we have just 2 half-hour topics left for the remainder of our afternoon. Thank you for coming in person on this as well. So we're going to shift things over as represented by our county counsel's office. The first one. Oh, somebody needs some caffeine. Okay,
5
the
minutes.
board's taking a 5-minute break. 5
Thank-
minutes, holding you to it.
Thank you.
Thank you, Diane.
Oh, it's Yeah. That water? Yeah.
Resolution order approving.
All right. Welcome back, commissioners.
I will have time to go get water. 1 second.
Oh, Soda Stream is England. So I don't have to deal with it.
All right, welcome back, everyone.
Thank you, Clerk Muss. Onward, how we go. We're going to turn it over to Mr. Carr and Mr. Anderson. Consideration of potential ordinance codifying county council processes.
I appreciate that y'all got caffeinated before the lawyer came on. We put you through lean dockets this morning and now we're gonna do codification this afternoon. So I hope you're well caffeinated.
Mummification?
Codification.
That's what I feel.
Wait a minute, who's the county council, Brad or?
Today it's me.
Yeah, we,
Good, just
Got a
a
few
while
more
longer.
weeks.
you still got 30 days.
They're both here. I just.
31.
31.
Who's counting?
Today's
Yes, one's
first.
gonna have to live through what
Only
the other.
30 more days. Of
Yeah, oh.
That's
Brad's
fine.
watching his every move.
Let me slip something in. So as you may recall, we talked about this back in December. When I started here, I promptly went to the code, or before I even started here, and looked to see what the duties of the county council were, what the authority was, and there was nothing. I mean, there's nothing in there. I think, I'm not even sure, the county council is not mentioned in the charter and very, maybe one sentence in the code. And so, well, and there's a reason for that. The reason is that the county council, under Oregon law, and that's why actually getting to the importance of this, under Oregon law, all the duties of the legal authority for the county reside with the district attorney, except if the county court, which is what the codes, appoints a county council. And this county and most of the large counties have chosen to appoint a county council. A few still do, I think, use the district attorney for their civil work. So I did find in our procedures manual a group of resolutions and orders going back to the 1980s, giving authority to the county council. But that's not very transparent, and some of them hadn't been updated in a while. So I took the opportunity to sort of put these together and attempt to bring them into the code and also to update them a little bit because some of the amounts and things are a little bit out of date. So
We also have the rules and procedures documents. So I hope you looked at that too.
yes. So the purpose here is as you did first reading this morning on Ordinance 898, and we'll bring it back on August 15th for second reading if the board so desires. But we're here today is to seek direction on whether or not we should go forward with that plan. So this addresses 5 different resolutions and orders. They're listed up there, and I'm not going to read them all, but you can see they pretty much cover the authority of what you want your lawyer to do. And so I'm going to go through each one individually and talk through the changes I made from the existing authority, or I'm proposing that you make when you codify these. There are a few changes that I think are necessary and would be very helpful, and some to just conform things to the way we do things now, as opposed to the way they thought we should do them in the 1980s. So this is the resolution order responsibility of the county council. There is nothing in the code that says that the board is going to appoint a county council. So I suggest adding a section that says the board will appoint the county council to clarify who appoints the county council and that it's the board intent that there be a county council. As I said, under state law, it is important to be clear that the board is appointing a county council because otherwise the DA has all of the civil authority. C3, just to clarify that the county council's office is responsible for drafting all resolutions and orders. It doesn't say that in there. That is our current practice. We do currently draft all resolutions and orders, and that is very important to me. I have occasionally seen a resolution and order that came forward that I did not like, and that you should never get something that we haven't gone over very thoroughly. So we've tried to control that, and we added to the section subsection F that the county council's review will be conducted in executive session, which is what you do under the authority of the state law. So this is hiring outside counsel. And so the board has given the county council the authority to hire outside counsel when necessary. The current limit is $25,000, and there are lawyers who can't get in the room for that. We don't spend a lot on outside counsel. You've invested in in-house legal counsel, so we don't have to do that. But in certain circumstances, we do need outside counsel. For example, if we have a conflict, we're representing 2 sheriff's deputies who have different interests, we'd have to hire outside counsel. And sometimes we hire outside counsel when we don't have the expertise in-house to supplement our expertise. environmental comes to mind. If we were doing a big environmental matter, we wouldn't try to do that because that would probably be malpractice.
I thought, Tom, when we first had this conversation, I thought that number was 250. I could be confusing this with another conversation we had about maybe it was contract authority for.
Yeah. Yeah, that's contract authority. That was 100 and you moved it to 300.
Yeah.
And what I'm suggesting here is that we just bring this into line.
Okay.
That it'd be up to 300.
Okay.
So conflict waiver, one of the challenges that we have is that there are a lot of the time when we want to hire a firm, they will have previously represented somebody because the county has varied interests and usually there's no real conflict, but under legal ethical rules, we'd have to, well, we can't waive a direct conflict, but if there's a conflict where, say, they've represented somebody who had an adverse interest of the county previously, we tend to be very liberal in waiving those conflicts because you want to be able to employ the best attorneys, and the best attorneys have very many clients. So we tend to want to be able to waive it. The subsection B, back in the 1990s, the American Bar Association completely changed the rules of ethics. They went from the disciplinary rules to the rules of professional conduct. We were still referring to the old rules, which don't exist anymore. And then the subsection E is a substantive change. It requires that the board be informed of every waiver. We do that in the hot sheet. We can continue to do that. I'm not sure that you need to know that or you care, but I would suggest removing that. It just is another procedural obstacle. But if that's something you don't want, we can obviously take it out. This is authority to initiate litigation. We have limited authority to litigate. Right now, we can only initiate litigation if there's a risk of up to $5,000. I suggest moving that to $50,000. That first point, we currently initiate litigation to collect taxes and commence condemnation actions. We'd slowed down a little bit, but at one point, the Washington County was doing more condemnation actions than anybody else in the state. And that's largely because of the extensive transportation funding that we've had in Washington County. So every transportation project needs some level of condemnation, to either condemning the right of way or even condemning an access easement so that you can store construction materials during the project. So we do a lot of condemnation. And I don't know that we've ever sought board approval for that. I've never seen it. So we've been violating this resolution and order. And then, but they would be limited to ones up to $100,000. So, and then collecting taxes, there's nothing in there about collecting taxes, but we routinely collect taxes. That's what we do. So just clarifying those things. And then, so those are all of them. The first reading was today, and the second reading would be on August 15th. And I just want to add that obviously I'm trying to rush this through before I go. I'd like to get it approved before I go. It's something that's been on my mind for some time, and I appreciate your consideration. Thank you. And Brad is here because he's going to be responsible for all this stuff.
Okay.
Commissioners, any questions?
The only one I had was around conflict.
Yes, sir.
Because conflict, I understand your point that people are going to be working with all kinds of different clients. Does your conflict policy apply to parties associated with the county?
Say again. I'm sorry. I'm not sure I understand.
Parties associated with the county. Let's say that one of our departments, anybody, we were involved in litigation and you're trying to hire the same attorney to do something for the county and they're representing us. Now, I know CPA's ethics we have to follow, but I mean, I suspect you would too.
Yeah.
And you just wouldn't waive that arbitrarily. And so,
No, but so that's exactly the sort of, if it's completely separate matter. So if an attorney at a big firm was representing you in a personal tax matter, say,
sure.
and we wanted to hire a different attorney to handle an HR matter.
Yeah, has no bearing then, yeah.
Yeah, but that under our ethical rules could raise a conflict. And so, and the rules we go by are the ABA's ethical rules. They have our own, and they're very strict. So they would have to disclose that conflict to us and we would have to waive it. And that's the kind of thing that they waived.
Yeah, the challenge you could run into is these big firms, it's if any attorney has ever worked on the case. And so it's really hard for those big firms. They always have to do conflict checking. go through this process.
I understand. You gotta make a living, so you're gonna represent different sides on different occasions for different things.
What we can't waive is an actual conflict where they're representing someone who's in the same litigation against the city, the county, and then that's prohibited.
All right, thanks.
That's good. I appreciate you doing this, Tom.
I just have a minor question for you, Tom. The number movement seemed pretty significant. We're going 5,000 to,
50,
and then,
that's the big one.
yeah, and then 25 to 300. And then I saw 5,000, you were recommending to 50,000 right there. 75 to 100 is not significant. Just to sort of use the analogy, if it's not broken, why fix it? What's causing you to suggest these?
So let's go.
I haven't had any, yeah, let's start with that.
So I'm not sure we've reported to you all the attorneys we've hired. And so we probably have violated this. My intent here is to bring it into line with all the other contracts the county does. Right now, the county cannot do a contract in excess of $300,000 without board approval. And as you can see, the date on that resolution and order is 1989. So it's way out of date, and it doesn't, what I'm just doing here is to try to conform it to our existing authority. And that $300,000 number is the same for contracts, and there's a transportation provision as well that sort of circles that number. So we can always reduce it if you would prefer, and just make sure we follow it. But this makes it easier for us to do our day-to-day business. And we probably have, I think, about 5 outside counsel contracts right now, off the top of my head.
Yeah, probably.
And none of them are of any significant amount.
But they're more than 25, is what you're saying?
I would suspect that we spent more than $25,000.
25 doesn't hardly even get you in the door, so.
Right. We have some unique conflict cases coming out of the sheriff's office where we're hired outside counsel, and we've spent well more than 25,000, I think.
Yeah. And part of the problem is we'll do a contract. The way we usually do our contracts is we do a not to exceed amount. So we'll put in a contract that's for, usually lawyers bill hourly. So we'll say the contract is at these rates up to an amount of $100,000 or $50,000 or something like that. And then we have to go back and they have to seek approval if they want to go further than that. So we track the billings and try to keep it under a certain amount so that we're aware. But that's the reason for that. And the other ones are smaller amounts. It just $5,000. That's in a section that says we can't bring litigation if the risk to the county would be more than $5,000. That's a very low amount for risk, and $50,000. I didn't want to raise it too much, but that seemed like a reasonable amount. But I'm open to anything that the board wishes. It's not. There's nothing set in stone. There's no magic to this. This is only 13 years old, but it's still, things have changed.
I'd just like to, Chair, I'd like to comment that I really appreciate the fact that you've gone over so many different pieces of how we operate as a county, from our rules and procedures all the way through, and looked at where we were, what alignment we need to create, and also how we can bring ourselves from, the dark ages forward. So thank you for that. And I appreciate the fact that you've done this through your tenure here. I know we're rushed here before you leave, but at the same time, I appreciate the fact that this is not new to us to have us look at things that tend to be more archived in nature, and I appreciate it.
My last comment is, I would say, in terms of the conflict of interest, to Commissioner Rogers' comment, I don't have a lot of experience with lawyers. I thought I would just give you a non-lawyer commentary. From my experiences, lawyers tend to take very serious about the conflict, declaring, if there's a conflict of interest. So that was just my little experience with lawyers. That's one thing that's very serious. If there's a conflict of interest, just putting it out there. So.
Indeed, if you want to get in trouble at the bar, don't follow the rules. Regarding
Is that
conflict.
what?
So, thank you for catching that it was not clear that the Board of Commissioners appoints the county council. I don't know that I'm entirely comfortable with just a resolution affirming that versus, our charter says that we hire a county administrator. And I appreciated that what you articulated said that per the state formation of counties, that I can't even remember how you put it. It allows for the district attorney to serve. And I don't even remember what else you said. I
Just-
can't play it
District
back.
Attorney handles everything, all the civil legal matters unless the county appoints county council.
Yeah, so having watched multiple county commissions in Multnomah County and Clackamas County function while I was an elected Metro councilor, I would want to make sure that it would take a minimum of 3 and that it is something that would have some county visibility. With it, here's the worst case that I'm imagining, that it only takes does the state law say that unless the board appoints a county council?
Yes.
Okay. Could we call out that section of state text in our RNO so that it's in the legislation that we approve for this? The
Okay,
reason why, I'm one of those people that reads resolutions and orders from prior years because it helps tell the story of intent. And I don't focus just on the be it resolved part. So I was thinking about a situation where it would only take 3 commissioners to decide to move the county council from reporting to the commission to reporting to the county administrator. See what I'm getting at? And I'm not sure that would serve the minority well. And that's what I'm trying to look out for. But it sounds like the state has already taken care of that. Okay.
And to be clear, this is not a resolution in order. This would be an ordinance that would be codified.
Oh, okay. I was just assuming that since this was set by resolution in order that what we would be doing, that's right.
No,
You
we're trying to
reminded me
move from
we had a
that.
First read of an ordinance.
Yeah, right.
Perfect. That addresses my concern then, because we can't just take steps on an ordinance.
Yeah, you have to repeal the
Lickety-split.
ordinance. Right.
And also because you've assured me that with the wording of the state, that the board couldn't just have the county council report into the county administrator. Is that right?
I think that's right.
Well, there are counties where the county council does in fact report to the county administrator. Not common, but that does exist in Oregon. And I'm not sure those counties are following state law. It does happen.
Do you think it runs counter to the wording or your interpretation of the state? Because I'm just trying to ensure that it's good and clear there may be future boards that say, you know, we'd like to have something different. And as long as they're doing something very clearly out in the public, which an ordinance does allow for that, versus pulling a fast one through just a minute order and a resolution in order.
I prefer to do a little research
Okay.
rather than having to do it. And we will respond to that question in the agenda item for the second reading and in the presentation so that we have a clear answer for you at that point.
And it may turn out that the only way my thought can or my idea can be followed through on is to put it on the list of potential county charter changes, just like changing the charter to automatically allow ordinances to be read by title only without having to make a motion every single time,
Yeah.
which at Metro, the county charter allows that. So. Thank you.
Are there any other questions?
That's it. That was it from me.
Thank you.
Yeah. Terrific. Great. Okay. Onward to the next one then.
Yeah, forest classification.
Yes.
And I understand Mike Cafferata, who is the district forester, is online and going to participate.
Hello,
There he is.
Mike. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me here very much. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can.
Excellent.
And we're just bringing up the presentation now.
I can't actually see you very well with the presentation up. So, please, interrupt if needed and all those kind of things. I'm sorry, I couldn't be there in person.
And for some reason, our presentation is slow in changing.
Oh, good.
You may recall that Mike was at the presentation that you had a few weeks ago.
Council for Forestland.
Yeah. Council.
So we just start talking about it or, okay, there we go. Very good. And Tom, were you going to introduce it or would you like me to just take it from here? I'm easy either way.
You can go ahead. I can just advance the slides for you.
Okay. Good.
You
Well,
see
go ahead and
them?
put it on the next slide for us there. And Tom, I appreciate you putting the presentation together. So, thank you for having me here, everybody. My name is Mike Cafferata. I'm the district forester in Forest Grove. And I would be there in person, but today I'm down in the bedrock fire trying to help the Department of Forestry and the private landowners and the U.S. Forest Service on this fire. And so I'm still here, but I had time to keep this going. This project is important to us. And so I didn't want to let this slip. So I appreciate Tom getting it on the calendar for today. Our goal today really kind of go over the background again. And then also we would like to ask you to either appoint a forest land classification committee or start that process. And there is another alternative pathway, which would be to say, we appreciate this, but Oregon Department of Forestry, maybe it's better if you took care of it. We've never done that before, but that is an option and I'd be happy to entertain that if you would prefer. So I would like to get resolution kind of on one way or the other though. So I think it's really a matter of good governance and we can talk about that. Go ahead, Tom. Okay, so why is this necessary? And I guess when I tell this story, it goes way back to the turn of the previous century and there was no fire protection. And back at that time, forest landowners, the forest land started to get value as railroads were built and as timber became more necessary. And so private landowners started providing their own fire protection, independent of any government agency. And that went along for a while, and some landowners provided fire protection and some didn't. And that wasn't very tenable. And so in 1913, they passed the compulsory, I forget what it was called, but an act that made everybody pay into the system. And when they passed that law, they had to decide, well, who is everybody? And so they drew a line in the forest. Well, they drew a line and it was in a certain place in Washington County. And I believe that's because the sheep farmers didn't want fire protection and the people who were trying to manage timber did. And so that's how they ended up drawing that line. And that law requires anybody who's within that, it requires forest landowners to provide fire protection. And they pay for that through a forest patrol assessment and they pay it to the Department of Forestry. So I missed a step there, sorry, but sometime in the 30s, those private associations who were doing the fire protection in our area turned it over to the state. And not every area did. So there's Douglas Forest Protectors Association. It's still a private company and they do forest protection. But in our area, it was turned over to the state, and landowners still pay half the bills and the other half is paid by the general fund. And so they pay a forest patrol assessment. They pay a fee for that fire protection. And inside those lines, it's supposed to be everybody who's affected by wildland fire. Go ahead and advance it one slide, Tom. And so that's been going on since the 1930s. And so in 1946, the county had a forest land classification committee. There's a newspaper clipping that talks about it. And so they went through this process in the 40s to decide, make sure that everybody that was supposed to be paying was paying. Go ahead and move it forward one more step for me, Tom. And so, you know, the question comes up, what's forest land? And I think you have to go back and think about it in the scope that they were talking about in the 30s. And really it was anybody who was benefiting from wildland fire protection, or it was anybody who could cause a problem. And so if you were in that environment where you were benefiting or you were causing a problem, you were part of the system and you were meant to pay into it. And so the statute is very broad. It's any woodland, brushland, timberland, grazing land, or clearing that at any time of the year contains enough forest growth, slashing, or vegetation in the judgment of the forester can be a fire hazard. And so really in Washington County, it's really inside our protection boundary, it's almost everything. And in Yamhill County, when we just went through this process, the really flat agricultural lands that were under sprinkler systems, those are not forest land and are not paying the fees, but pastures and brushland and anything that carries fire, that's what it's meant to pay the fee. And that's how they approached it. Okay, so how do you, I'll show you in a minute a map of what's evolved over time. But you know, since the 40s, we haven't done this process in a long time. We're trying to refresh it. And the reason is that, you know, sometime in the 70s, somebody subdivided their land and they sold off 40 acres of an 80-acre parcel. Somehow that 40 acres fell through the cracks and not everybody is paying into the system. And so we can look at a map. And maybe Tom, why don't you flip to the very end, those last 3 slides? Let's look at those for just a minute. And so that's a great slide right there. The blue line is those boundaries they drew in the 30s that said anybody inside the blue lands who meets that definition of forest land has to pay. The gray properties are paying the fee, which is like $1.41 an acre, and the red properties aren't. And so that's a function of over time, people not understanding the system, you know, that when someone subdivided, it got through the county process and we reviewed that process and that fee did not get assessed. And so those red properties, they're getting the benefits of fire protection, but their neighbors are paying the cost. And so fundamentally, this is about equity. It actually doesn't affect our budget because if we charge the people in red the $1.41, essentially we will charge everybody else a little bit less. So it doesn't affect the budget so much as it affects who pays. So maybe go to the next slide there, Tom, we'll look at that. So that just zooms in a little bit and you can see, and again, in red, they're not paying, and in green they are, and the blue line is our boundary. Maybe the next one, I think it's really the same thing over again. Yeah, so here's the whole county, and you can see there's like a shotgun of missed properties. And fundamentally what this committee does is it reviews the county and looks at all those properties and says, are they forest land? Do they meet that definition? And if so, we will send them a letter, explain the process to them, and add them to the system. That's essentially what we do, is take the committee, property by property, review the county, make that determination, and then make a change. Okay, back up to where we were. Sorry about the hopping around. So there's 2 possibilities we mentioned at the beginning, and the classic is that the governing body of the county creates this committee. You have a recruitment process. We would go through that process. We would recruit 3 landowners that you would appoint. We have one that we would put on the committee, appointed by the state forester. We have one from the Oregon State Extension Service and one from the State Fire Marshal. And I think Fire Defense Board Chief Kenny Fentress is involved and interested. He's not here today, but it's a very close partnership with the rural fire departments. And we can talk about that relationship, but we really value that and they're a part of that process. The alternate process we can do is that you can choose not to appoint a committee, and then we can do that ourselves. We view it as a good thing to do in partnership with the county. But from a good governance standpoint, it has to get done. And I'm under pressure to get these done. We've been refreshing all across the state. We did Yamhill County, and then we came to your committee a couple of years ago, and we're working on this. And Tom can maybe talk about the intergovernmental agreement a little bit. We were working on that, and then pandemic hit. We've all been busy. Now that's over with, and we need to pick it back up again. So I would be happy to do bullet 2. I have no problem doing it ourselves and keeping you apprised of the process. But I'm also very happy to go through bullet 1. And so, yeah, I just mentioned we did Yamhill County. The ones in pink are not accomplished yet. So you can see that my responsibilities, I've got Yamhill County done. I need to do Washington County, and then I've got to do Columbia County. So I've got some work to do. So do my coworkers. I'm not alone, but I am under pressure to get it done. Okay, go ahead, Tom. So let's see, we had a work session in 2019. The board directed.
That was our second work session.
Yeah.
The 3 of
I saw
us.
that.
Yeah, that's right. You were brand new. That's right. It was
Little green.
That was not a very fair ask probably either. And so the intergovernmental agreement, we just clarified that if somebody doesn't like this and protests, that the Department of Forestry will manage that. And maybe Tom probably has more eloquent language for that. I can tell you some people will not be happy. We mailed letters to, I forget how many people in Yamhill County, 1,000 people, adding them to the system. And then we had a public meeting, and they all showed up to understand why we were going to charge them all $1.40 an acre for their fire protection. And it was a little bit contentious, I'll tell you. But the rational Oregonians in the room, by the time they got to understand that it was about equity and that their neighbors were paying for them, all but 1 or 2 of them were like, yeah, I don't like it, but I understand. There's a couple people that will never be happy with it. I remember one person, kind of slamming the table, I've been here 7 years and I've never seen a fire. And some of us think, well, 7 years isn't very long, but to that person, they didn't understand the value of wildland fire protection. And so they have avenues to protest, and we would help them through that process. So, and we're happy to do that. We don't see that as the county's job. That's the department's job. And we've agreed to that through that intergovernmental agreement. Tom, do you want to add to that, or?
No, so that he recites the IGA. The concern that was raised back in 2019 was that people who don't like the adjustment are going to want to complain to somebody, and we made it clear that that's going to be the responsibility of the Department of Forestry and not the county, because we do have some experience in collecting taxes, and we have enough people who are not happy. So the Department of Forestry was willing to take that on.
Oh, they'll still come and complain to us.
Yes, they will.
They will. And we will try to take that burden off you to the extent that we're able, but it is a joint process, right? We want the public involved. It's all public meetings. We will meet everybody on their front porches and on their backyards and show them fire history. And there is a role here for the county too in the collection process. So I'm glad you mentioned that, Tom, that the assessment goes on to the county sends that out with their tax collection. So it's on the yearly tax collection. So it comes into the county and then it's dispersed to the Department of Forestry. So there's a workload there. And very common in the other counties is that it's also the website for it is hosted by the county as part of the county committees. Now, if you choose not to do it and we host the whole thing, then we would do our own on the side. But classically, that's done by the county. So.
Great.
So I think the next steps from our perspective is it's really in your court to decide, and so we would help you make that decision and kind of look forward to that. So.
And we've tentatively scheduled the resolution order.
Thank you, Mike. We'll turn the table over to the commissioners to see who has questions.
I have a question. if we choose to, number one, to create the Forestland Classification Committee, what is the care and feeding of that committee? How does that, where does it sit? How do we maintain the committee structure and that type of thing?
Yeah. Thank you. That's a great question, how to maintain that committee. We would see that as our role. So there's the recruitment process. I know you have a established process. We would probably do some background work to encourage some people to apply for that so that there at least would be some applicants. It's not everybody that wants to do this kind of committee work. So we'd like to make sure there's some applicants for you to choose from. And once they're selected, we would do the bulk of the heavy lifting around planning the meetings, putting together the agendas, running the meetings, managing the public information that goes out. We would like to rely on your website to make that stuff public. And if you go to the Yamhill County website, you'll see there's a forest classification page where they maintain that. And the committee would actually meet every year. And we would try to do a little bit, we would do one refresher of the whole county. And then our goal would be to meet once a year and just keep it fresh. So it's not a huge workload. And again, we would manage that process.
Thank you.
Any other questions? For those of you who don't have questions, are you?
Well, are you, what are we thumbs upping on? We got two possibilities.
Exactly. I'm asking for your opinion.
Oh,
Or do you want me to go through my questions first?
I just soon go through your questions.
Okay.
I'm not sure.
So I have a laundry list, but I think they're all easy. So the purpose of the committee, I just want to get affirmation, is to handle these classification changes. Okay. But the actual rate that is charged is something the state decides, right?
That is correct. And in fact, we decide that it is what the state decides. We do that working with the private landowners. There's a Northwest Forest Protective Association of landowners. They work with us on what level of protection they want. And part of that is how much it costs. And so it's actually a joint effort between us and the landowner community that's protected. And
Okay. Great. But it's all very transparent and done collaboratively from.
we try.
Yep. Okay, so I just want to make sure that in terms of the definition for forest land, that I'd like to get confirmation, it excludes those acres that are supported through irrigation, such as those acres that are covered by the Tualatin Valley Irrigation District.
I'm not sure I'd say it quite that way. I would say
Okay.
it's the committee's job to look at the landscape and decide what they think meets that definition.
Okay,
And classically in other places and that's why it's a local process, is trying to decide what does the local community think needs wildland fire protection. And that can mean a
Okay.
little bit different things in different places. But pretty classic is something that has heavy agriculture and is very flat. We would not see that as a spread risk. And so probably does not contribute risk to the neighbors and probably is not at risk from a fire in the high country coming down to it. But I think that's really the role of the committee.
okay. Well, the reason that I asked is because if we choose to handle the classification committee, to create the classification committee and therefore to make sure it gets appointments, I would want us to make sure that there's an appropriate purpose statement, bylaws, all the training that we do for public meeting laws, but also the following 4 items: that it's clear what their term is, that it's clear what the maximum number of terms can be for these appointments. Any skills required would be the 3rd thing, and then how often we anticipate they will need to meet. Then, excuse me for a second, what I'm really getting to is the 3 landowners that we would be appointing. I'm hopeful that we would appoint a small woodland owner, a large woodland owner. Those are usually timber companies. And also I was thinking about ag crops such as seed, orchard, or vineyard tend to be the major three categories. And of course, all of this, one of the things I asked for our roundtable packet, and it's in there, is acreage information. And that includes 80% of our acreage in rural zoning, with 47% of the total Washington County acreage, that's 470 some odd thousand acres, is exclusive forest and conservation land. So that's where I was thinking about, if it's not timber, what are some of the other major uses, non-residential uses here in Washington County? So I think we should give it a whirl. It has meaning here in Washington County. And as I already mentioned, 80% of our acreage supports just over 26,000 residences in Washington County, but it's a huge amount of acreage.
It is.
And is really important to the definition of what geographically Washington County is. And if after some number of years, it would be more efficient for the state to do this, then the board always has that opportunity as well. But I think we should give it a whirl.
I think that's great. Thank you. So
that was just for me. I need to check with my colleagues.
Could I,
Oh.
what you just said, Catherine, I appreciate your definition. I think we should also ask for the application of an equity lens. I recognize that it might be different, but that would follow suit with what the other things that we do.
Yeah, but this is very land associated.
Yeah, I don't know how we plug in equity
I don't,
into that.
yeah. This is really,
I understand that what I'm asking for here is,
and we only have 3 seats. Yeah.
So just one quick question, Mike, it seems like that once we start this and we kind of go through and do the whole process, like, isn't it kind of one and done, or we just every year after that, it's kind of a refresh? Just to
Yep,
make
it's-
sure everything's good?
Yep, that's right. If, as long as you do it regularly, then it doesn't get out of hand. I think it just went for decades with very little attention. And so now there's a refresh needed that's more holistic.
Because,
After that, it becomes much more maintenance.
yeah, because the property changed hands would be primarily how that would get, because I mean, it's a fixed number. And probably the only way that's going to change is if you subdivide, but that's different for large parcels, especially forest. So anyway, okay.
Yeah, that's right.
I'm in agreement. I'm not willing to subordinate our opportunity here, so I'm okay with number uno.
Was Pam? If he's shaking.
Chair Harrington, if I might add one side topic that is interesting, and maybe Tom, if you could pull up the last picture on that slide deck one more time. Those lines that were drawn in the 30s or whenever that was, they're a little bit odd because
Wait, time out. We need the slide presentation back up.
Yeah, because it's not in our slide presentation.
Yep. It's not yet. Those slides aren't currently available to the board.
oh, I got you. Yeah, I think we added this last
We
slide
just
last
got them
night.
last night.
Which it's not been uploaded because I just downloaded the packet.
Is that the one? Like,
Yeah, maybe the one that has the whole county. Right there. Okay, so it actually has the whole county, but what you see here is there's Hag Lake is down there in the kind of the middle of the map at the lower end.
Hang on.
Yeah,
Somebody figure
I
out.
think there's a better picture with Hag Lake on it.
Well, there is, but I just want to show you the overall.
It's outside of the boundary.
Can somebody see it?
Yeah, that's right. Right where your head is.
Yeah. Down at the bottom, Catherine, right there.
Right there.
Yeah.
Okay.
Right where your head is.
Can everybody see where Hag Lake
That
is?
one.
I want to reiterate that the board.
There's Hag Lake. So what about it?
Well, you can see that if you're on the west side of Hag Lake, you're paying fire protection. But if you're on the east side, that looks and is forest land, and we've had very challenging wildland fires there.
Oh.
But it doesn't have Oregon Department of Forestry protection. It has Gaston or Forest Grove rural fire protection. And as you go north, it's the same way. The line is drawn a little too far up in the forest. And so those rural fire departments are outstanding general firefighters and medic. And so what they provide is first aid for everybody, and they provide general fire protection, and they're paid for that. But when a fire is spreading across the landscape, they generally don't have as many tools and as much training as the wildland firefighters do. That's not entirely true, but that's for the most part. And so, for example, about 3 weeks ago, there was a 1 acre fire just outside of our boundaries in the Banks Fire District. And it's on pretty steep ground, and it was a hot, windy day. And so it puts them and us in an awkward position because they really want the help from wildland fire. They want our crews and our staff that have the right equipment and the right training. However, we're not paid to be there, and we have a protection responsibility elsewhere. And so we're hesitant to send as much as we would like to help them with. So we sent them 2 engines and some overhead, some fire managers, and they could have used a lot more, but they're outside of our district and we didn't want to stretch too thin. So once we get done with classifying the forest as forest land or not forest land, I would like to look at the boundaries and ask our community, are the boundaries in the right place? And maybe we should move those blue lines a little bit to make sure that the people that really need wildland fire protection, that it's all of them. And do that in conjunction with the Fire Defense Board and with the fire protection chiefs, the rural fire departments. And so I want to keep that on your radar, that the step 1 is who should be paying, but step 2 is, are the lines in the right place? It's just been a long time since those were drawn. Thank you for letting me have a little go back there.
Okay. Well, 4 of us are ready to move to option 1. Commissioner Rogers prefers option 2. So
I would simply say why I'm on option 2 is that we don't do the assessment. I still think the state, we're going to decide what's going to happen on lines and what's going to happen in terms of what's going to be ultimately decided. It's an area that nobody in this room was alive the last time that this board ever dealt with. It's a very complex, difficult issue and kind of out of our wheelhouse. So I respect my 4 colleagues want to jump into something that's so uncertain, but I don't. So you got 4.
I feel like ODF's going to give us plenty of guidance and support on this. So maybe that's an expectation, Mike, but I think that's probably true. And yeah, I'm not willing to at this point in time. This is pretty important stuff, and I'm not ready to subordinate that to an outside organization.
And Mike, our public services building for a county appointed committee or one where we participate would be available, but I can also see how you might want to use a public facility that's closer to where the property owners live. For example, out in Forest Grove or whatever. So, yeah.
Thank you very much. Yeah, we've typically used the local fire departments because they're proximate to the forest land, but I really appreciate that offer, and we might take you up on it.
All righty, great. Well, thank you for pulling and working with our team to pull together the committee information that is needed, and we'll get it slotted in and look forward to advertising this out and also getting your assistance for engaging with the kind of landowners that are out there to get these appointments filled.
Okay, very good. And do I come on the 15th as well, or how does the 15th work?
It will be an action item. Chair, would you like a presentation? I assume you would for an action item, bringing forward a resolution in order.
Yes, and also does that give you enough time to enumerate the information for
Yes.
creating such a committee and defining the terms, max terms, skills required, how often they meet, and the kind of people we're seeking across these three positions?
I would anticipate putting all of that in the resolution in order, which we can update to include that. It's plenty of time.
Okay, terrific. Great. That will form it, but then we'll have to go through the application solicitation process.
Yes.
Okay, is there a particular deadline by which, Mike, you would be seeking that the committee members be appointed and target for that first meeting?
I think from our perspective, just good public process is what we're looking for. There's no rush, but there's also, a need just to be professionally moving through it.
Yeah.
That's all.
Okay, great. I just wanted to make sure that if
Yeah.
there was a deadline date breathing down our neck, that we were cognizant of that before, like the week before. So thank you.
And I'll be there in person on the 15th, barring local fire emergency. I plan to be there.
It's great. It's great. It's great to close the loop on this topic from January 15th, 2019.
Thank
Terrific. Thank you very much, Tom.
Wheels moves.
Thank you, Mike. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Tom.
Take care.
Well, there's a global pandemic.
Yeah. Just a
Oh, they're just
minor
that.
little thing.
Mhm.
So that brings us to the end of today's published work session agenda.
Your draft letter, Madam
Yeah.
Chair.
Oh, yes,
Oh, yeah.
yes. Reminded of myself of that earlier and then proceeded to forget again. So we have a draft letter. The ask of the letter is, if I'm remembering it correctly, is to support the mega application.
Mhm.
So,
A finely crafted letter from our GR team.
Yeah, it's fine, as always.
okay, I think you got all of our thumbs up. So thanks very much. I'm sorry I forgot to come back to this at 1:00, but Aaron and Stephen were doing work while they were in the audience. So that's it. So we're done for today's work session day. Goodbye.
Get the picnic.